Hello, RCICs and future RCICs. So today we have a quick little lesson on a recent change in immigration. So I wanted to make a video about this, and this is just going to be a really quick lesson. It might not play a role in your exam, but it does link some really interesting topics together. So that is the reason we will work through this lesson today. So you've probably seen in the news recently, or if you're on the IRCC subscribers list, or you just check out the website constantly, well, there are constant changes, constant improvements in immigration. Now, this is an interesting one because it focuses specifically on a group of people who are Hong Kong residents. Now, in the government releases, they call these people Hong Kongers. And I love the word, actually, so I'll use it quite a bit today. Now, there are three pathways for Hong Kongers now. One has to do with an open work permit. So we're going to go through each one as we carry on in this lesson. This first one is really interesting because you can be a person from a Hong Kong resident, and if you are in another country, let's say you live in Malaysia, and you have graduated from a program within the last 5 years, and that program qualifies for an ECA to be a Canadian equivalent. There are some specific elements of programs we'll look at in a little bit. Well, awesome, because that person can apply for an open work permit. So it would be similar to a postgrad work permit. Now, the two PR programs are here. So we've got people with Canadian experience. And I mean, I don't think really somebody has to specifically be from Hong Kong for this one, but a person with Canadian work experience qualifies for so many different programs. So this one is just another one, really. And I think the reason for it, we'll see later on, is to ensure that people who have Hong Kong residency are not left in a situation where they have to go back to their place of residence and maybe be at risk. So you do have two elements in here as well. So it is somebody with recent Canadian work experience and also an educational credential. So this one's interesting because you don't necessarily need the ECA or anything like that. You just have to prove that you have an educational credential from within the last 5 years. Now, the other one has to do with international students who are here in Canada, and as you know, Canada loves international students. Well, I guess international students are coming here again because the borders are opening up bit by bit, and the government really works hard to retain international students after they graduate. So, and why wouldn't they, right? It's a person with Canadian education, Canadian work experience who wants to stay in Canada. It's a home run. So this public policy will run for 5 years. You can see over there. And of course, the tricky part with this is that those people have to be here in Canada. So when we go back to see the announcements from the government for these programs, well, this one here is pretty straightforward. It's very much the same as almost a postgrad work permit, right? So somebody who qualifies for a postgrad work permit, the DLI situation, they have to have completed 50% of their study while in Canada. And then you have the various degrees and diplomas, very similar to a postgrad work permit. The last point there talks about diploma programs for graduates. And it looks a little bit tricky, but it's not really. It's basically if someone has a degree and they want to get a post-degree diploma. Well, that's what that refers to on the bottom. Okay, the next one is somebody with 1 year of Canadian work experience within the last 3 years. So what does that sound like? CEC, of course. So again, this is, I think, an attempt by the IRCC to get people who might be in a vulnerable position to be able to obtain PR quickly. And you can see there's an additional element here. So you do have an educational requirement, which of course the CEC does not have. Well, this educational requirement, though, is a little bit different from, I think, any other program, really, because the person would have to have graduated with that credential within the last 5 years. And that credential doesn't have to be Canadian. So it doesn't even have to have an ECA, really. So it's an interesting way, again, to, in my opinion, these programs are amazing because they really help meet Canada's refugee requirements. I don't say requirements, like Canada's not looking for refugees, but Canada has an obligation to help people in need. And they also get to help bring in people with education, Canadian experience. And there's a language requirement as well, as we'll see later on. Okay, and finally that work permit. So it's an open work permit for recent Hong Kong graduates. So what does this mean? Now, if somebody has an open work permit to be able to come to Canada, what happens usually? Well, often, I would say almost all the time really, the person would work for a year, 2 years, qualify for one of many programs. It could be CEC, FSW, PNP, and keep transitioning towards PR, then towards citizenship later on. There's probably a family sponsorship in there somewhere. Maybe the person gets married and has kids. So anyways, it's a really good way to have Hong Kong residents be able to come to Canada, I would say quickly, and get working. So again, really interesting. This one was from February. So in February they launched this, they announced it and launched it. And then the other two, the PR areas, were announced and launched in June. So if we take a step back and think of why Canada would do this, well, it relates to, of course, just like everything, actually, every immigration program relates to the objectives that are presented in the Act and regulations. Now, for this one, it really deals with refugees, but it is, you can see the note I made here on the bottom, it's really interesting because it's more like selecting specific refugees, or not refugees, but people in refugee-like circumstances. So it is one of the first programs in Canada to really match refugees who have a certain amount of education, who I guess studies would show integration rates of people who graduated recently or people with Canadian experience, Canadian education, and how well they integrate into Canadian society by getting jobs and staying, basically, and being happy Canadians. So it does have that integration element. It also has, of course, the element of Canada protecting people who are in refugee-like situations. So just a quick little review of what has happened here. So there were demonstrations and things like that in Hong Kong, as I'm sure we all saw from a while ago. The government announced that they're going to help Hong Kong residents to come to Canada. So, of course, when they say residents, they don't just mean the person himself or herself. They do mean family as well. When you see a question relating to who is an actual Hong Kong resident, is it somebody who works there? Is it someone who maybe was born there? Well, it is over here. It's on the third point. It's someone who holds that SAR, or British National Overseas Passport. Now, in my world, in the IELTS world, I assess people from Hong Kong constantly, and the passports are different. I always thought it was pretty interesting, and it does represent, of course, the person's residency. So another element has to do with the PRA. So they are, if you remember from the PRA lesson, we have a big lesson on PRA. It is, I don't remember how many hours long. I think it's 3 hours long. And remember, there is a bar on, of course, applying for a PRA. If your application for protection is rejected, well, in this case here, these Hong Kong residents do not have to abide by that bar. And of course, people who have fled to other countries can well, they can go for the work permit like we saw before. And I like that they put this on the website as well, because we're just looking at one pathway here, really. Well, three pathways, but there are different ones, right? A Hong Kong resident who meets the qualifications of a PNP can immigrate under that program, right? Express entry. Of course, if a person meets those requirements of the FSW, the person can, of course, immigrate through there. Well, if the person is in a refugee-like situation, they don't have to go through these programs, right? They could, of course, go through the regular refugee programs. Okay, and then they had other elements in here really where they are trying to ease the burden for Hong Kong residents. I don't really know how many Hong Kong residents are in Canada already. It doesn't seem like there are too many when compared to other immigration countries or immigration places. But they did want to, make this easier for people to come here, to stay here, extend their stay, make it easier for their family. And I always love hearing that at the end, as the last bullet point, where they are speeding up these processes for Hong Kong residents. So how can people apply? Well, we spoke about the requirements a little bit before, but there are interesting procedures for this, and we're going to link the rest of this to those procedures. So if you take a look at the application instructions, it says to use the Canada Post ePost Connect system. So it's pretty interesting, and if you go to that actual website, you'll see it's basically a secure way to upload documents, collaborate on documents. So similar to maybe Google Documents or Dropbox or something like that, but they do have a bit of a different system for this particular program. And this is the big one here. So, because it's one thing to have a special program, but if that program is going to take years for a person to be processed, it might not be the best program for a person in a dangerous situation, right? So with this, it is interesting because they automatically get priority processing. When people apply for any of these elements here, so you can see it's pretty much everything in immigration, really. Work permit, study permit, family sponsorship, PR, etc., right? It's automatically prioritized. So if you look on the IRCC website about processing times, they usually have something up there, but these days it's not very accurate, and they tell you that it's not very accurate because of course, all of the COVID changes and all the work that they're doing there. But it might be 6 months, or maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit shorter. When they prioritized spousal sponsorships, for example, well, it moved really quickly. And with this one, given the refugee-like situations of the people who qualify for this, it would be quite a quick process. So when you think of the application itself, it is very similar to all the other ones, right? Where you have, of course, your 0008, which is everywhere. The interesting ones are, of course, 7A and 7B. So we'll take a look at those in the next slides over here. But for the other ones, your 5669, 5406, supplementary information, it's the usual stuff, right? Language scores, work experience, education, family, etc. I wanted to bring up a point because I saw this week and I thought it was an interesting element, and that is the use of a representative. So remember, ICCRC as a topic plays a large role on the exam. And this is something that happens in real life quite a bit, where people will hire a ghost consultant or a fake, I don't know, lawyer or something like that in another country, or they just pay someone to do it because of reasons. And they won't fill out that use of a representative form. So one of the discussions I had this week with a colleague had to do with somebody who had their PR application rejected before visiting this RCIC. And the reason it was rejected was because of misrepresentation, because the person didn't fill out the use of a representative form because the person used an unauthorized representative. So it's a pretty big deal. And when we think of misrepresentation, we often think of forgery and that type of thing. And this person, received, well, an inadmissibility charge under Article 40 because of using an authorized representative, and they didn't declare the unauthorized representative because it's unauthorized. And of course, it led to a very, very difficult situation for that person now. Okay, but that's just a quick little side note. Let's move on back to this particular program. Okay, so the Schedule 7A is really straightforward. I was pleasantly surprised when I opened up this one. And, personally, I don't think I'll work with this program actually in practice. But for all of you, hey, part of the lesson today is that immigration changes. There's always opportunities for you to help people. So if this is an area that you might explore, maybe you have an office or contacts in Hong Kong already, it's an amazing opportunity for you to help people become Canadian, right? So anyways, with this one here, you could see that really and I cut this down so you can actually see it, but it was really like 2 pages long and there was almost nothing on it. The important part is section 2 over here, and it just focuses on that diploma. And that's almost it really on this. So it is a pretty straightforward application. Now for Schedule B, which was the Hong Kong residents who have Canadian work experience, well, remember, they have to have that educational credential. And it doesn't have to be ECA verified, it doesn't have to be Canadian. If it is, hey, that's a big bonus. And they do have to have that Canadian work experience. So again, really straightforward in terms of the application process. In reality, the work that you do it's a lot of pre-screening, right? To see if someone actually qualifies for a program before applying. And if someone does qualify and you do the application, I think you'll be pretty happy because it's pretty straightforward. And of course, if it's prioritized, hopefully the wait time is, I looked it up, I couldn't find the exact number, but if it's 6 months, if it's 2 weeks, yeah, I think you'll be pretty happy because part of the goal for you is, of course, getting your clients' results quickly. And fees. All right, so people often think that because a person is in a refugee-like situation or they need protection, that their fee is exempt, and it is not. So for this one, remember, for a right of permanent residence fee is actually exempt for refugees, but this one isn't necessarily a refugee stream, right? This one is more economic, or I think it's a mix between the two, really. But in terms of fees, it's just like an economic one, where they do charge the right of permanent residence fee. So for this one, you've got, of course, all the fees here. Nothing too tricky. They do want, of course, the right of permanent residence fee paid at the same time as the application fee itself. And that's pretty much it. I mean, you add on the family, and that's just like a regular economic application. Okay, so we kept this one at about 20 minutes, and that's what I wanted to do, so that's perfect. You've got further reading over here. It'll be in the links just under the video on the website. And if you find this to be an interesting topic, go for it. I mean, part of the reason we talked about this, like I said, is because there are always changes in immigration. I hope you see immigration changes as immigration opportunities for your clients, and really as somewhat business opportunities for you, really, because you will find a lot of different niches and areas to help your clients. So this was a quick little video on one of the, I would say, really small, I mean, very precise areas of immigration, because you're dealing with a specific area of the world and a program for specific people from this specific area. All right, everybody. So thank you for your time in looking through this lesson. Like I said, I don't really think this one could play a large role on your upcoming exam. It's always good to stay updated with new programs and changes. And of course, those interlinking topics that relate to other programs that we discussed in here are, of course, a very valuable lesson for us in getting ready for the exam. And the other part of this was to think about the big picture, the work you're going to do in helping people. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye.